We're learning the second Sikha on Parshas Tisa in Chelek Chavav on page 238. The shir today is being learned Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Menashe Kaltman. Von dem Pasuk Mashachta boy es oil moed geimer. In the Pasuk in this week's Parsha, where it speaks about the Shemen HaMishcha, the anointing oil that was used to anoint the Mishkan and the vessels, the Kelim in the Mishkan. So in this Pasuk, Mashachta boy es oil moed, is Rashi maitik the verto Mashachta boy. Rashi quotes the two words, and you shall anoint with it, on his Mefarish, and explains how this anointing was done. Kol HaMashiches kemin chof Yevonis. All of the anointings was in the shape of a chof Yevonis, a Greek chof. We'll see soon what exactly that shape is. Rashi in another place explains. Chutz mishal malachim shein kimin nezer. Besides, when kings were anointed, the shape of this anointing was like a crown. Now the Makif von Rashi's Pirish, wegen the Efania Mashiach, is in Gemara Hoirius and in Krisis. The source of what Rashi says here regarding how the Mashiach was done is in the Gemara in two places. On the Lashon HaGemara in Hoirius is, the language the Gemara says to express this point in Hoirius is as follows. Moishchen es hamalachim kimin nezer, v'sakayanim kimin ki. Kings are anointed in the shape of a crown, and the kayanim like a key. And then the Gemara explains, my kimin ki. Amar Rav Menashe bagada kimin chof Yevani, like the Greek chof. So now Rashi is quoting this Gemara. Aber zusammen damit is Rashi bepirushay mishana von Lashon Gemara become a pratim. While Rashi quotes the Gemara, however, he changes in the language from the Gemara in a few details. Aleph, number one, Rashi sagt kol ha-meshiches. Rashi begins to speak about all meshiches. Nit nor meshiches kayanim. He's not only speaking about the kayanim that were anointed. Wie steht in Gemara, as the Gemara addresses, only the meshicha of the kayanim and the meshicha of the malachim. Beis at his makdim kol ha-meshiches far meshiches malachim. Rashi begins to talk first about all different anointings before he mentions the meshicha of the kings. Gimel, in connection to this, and Nachmer, furthermore, afil nachtem. Even this, after, when he brings about meshicha of the kings, bringt Rashi meshichas malachim nit als above dim b'fnei atzmai. When he speaks about the meshicha of the kings, he doesn't speak about their anointing as a point and a din for itself. Wie in Gemara, as the Gemara brings the malachim as a meshicha for itself, and the kayanim as a meshicha for itself. Not als prat hayetze chutz min haklal from kol ha-meshichas. Rather, he only brings the anointing of the kings as a detail, which is an exception to the meshichas that there were by the kayanim. As Rashi says, chutz mishal malachim, except the anointing by the kings. So what's the reason for all these changes in the language of Rashi? The time from the Shinuyim is moving bepashtus. The reason for all these changes is simply understood. Rashi da ala Teire is the mefarish pshutish mikra. Rashi here is only coming to explain the simple understanding of the pasuk. Und in die psukim retzich wegen mehrere meshiches. And in the psukim here, it speaks of a number of anointings. Meshiches ha-mishkan v'ha'aren. It speaks about the Mishkan and the Arein and the Kelim and all the other vessels that are anointed. Anoich Meshichas Aaron ubanav, and it speaks about Aaron and his sons that are anointed. Aber wegen Meshichas Malachim wird nicht erwähnt. But the fact that kings are anointed is not mentioned here in the Psukim at all. Und the Rebbe is Rashi mefarish, and therefore Rashi explaining the Psukim here says Kol ha-meshiches, all the anointings, wegen welches retzich in the psukim, of which it speaks of in the psukim here, are kemin chof Yevonis, are in the shape of this chof Yevonis. Chutz mishal malachim, but steht nit in the psukim, besides the anointing of the kings, which is not mentioned here, shein kimin nezer, which is in the shape of a crown. That's how Rashi describes it here in connection to coming to explain the anointings mentioned in the psukim here. Lefi zeh bleibt aber nit glattig. But according to this, it's still not understood as follows. Klal de Rashi ala Teire is doch, the rule about Rashi ala Teire is, as is nit kein sefer halachis, nor ani lebasi elo lepshutish al mikra. Rashi is not a sefer that brings halachis on the psukim. Rather, he's only coming to explain the simple pshat of what the pasuk is saying, as Rashi himself says. Is havas staf Rashi bechlal meisiv zayin doch chutz mishal malachim chol. So why does Rashi at all have to add this point? Except by kings, that the anointing was done differently. Vibaltas in their parsha, anoichin di psukim u parsha shalifneze, in this parsha here, and in psukim and in parshas before where it mentions about anointings, Vet klal nit amon wegen Meshichas Malachim. The anointing of a king is not mentioned at all. Okay, so now here the Rebbe will bring in Sif Beis additional times earlier where Rashi speaks about the anointing of Shemen HaMishcha or with other oil. Benigay the way von HaMashiach hat schon Rashi mefarish gewährt in the Parsha Shalifneze, Parsha Tetzaveh, Kama Pamim. Regarding how the Mashiach is done, so Rashi explained this already a few times before in the previous Parsha in Tetzaveh. With Pasik or the Kike Matzis Meshucham Bashemen. When it speaks about the matzahs that were baked for the karbanis that were brought when the Kayanim were installed into their kohuna. So Rashi there says that regarding these matzahs, that they were smeared, they were anointed or smeared with the oil. So Zokt Rashi, Achar afiyosan, after they are baked, Moishchan, Kemin Chof Yevanis, they are anointed or smeared with this oil in the shape of a Chof Yevanis, Shehi Asuya Kenun Shalanu. And here, Rashi tells us what the Chof Yevanis is. It's in the same shape as the Nun in the Aleph base. So this is the first time Rashi talks about this Chof Yevanis, and here he says it's like a Nun. Etliche Psukim Nochte, a few psukim later, by Minya from Meshichas Aaron, where the pasuk speaks about anointing Aaron, Zokt Rashi, there Rashi says, Af Meshichazu Kimin Ki. This anointing as well was also like the ki, which is this Chaf Yevanis, and that is Neisen Shemen al Reishai. The oil is placed on his head, Uvein Rise Einav, and between the eyebrows, Umechabram Be'etzpa, and he attaches them with his finger. It creates the shape of the Chaf Yevanis. Und danach, beim Pasuk wegen Meshichas HaMizbeach, and then in the pasuk about the Mizbeach, which was anointed as well, Zok Rashi, V'chol HaMeshichas Kimin Chaf Yevanis. All the times when there was anointing done, it was in the shape of the Chaf Yevanis. Now the time, Umoke Bepashtos, was Rashi Zok beim zweiten pasuk, wegen Meshichas Aaron, Af Meshichas Hu Kimin Ki, when Rashi in the second time explains the shape of the Meshicha. So Rashi says that this anointing as well, when Aaron was anointed, it was also in the same shape of the Chaf Yevanis. Israel is kunt behemshech zum friedigen Pasuk by the Meshicha von Rekike Matzes. Rashi is saying, Af, here too, in other words, following what he said before regarding the matzahs that were also shaped, the Meshicha was with this shape. Aber lefize dafen verstehen. But according to this, we need to understand as follows. Pavos is Rashi beim dritten Pasuk wegen Meshichas Mizbeach und sagt klal, and here by the third time when it comes to the anointing of the Mizbeach, and Rashi here says a rule v'chol ha-meshichas. Here he says all anointings are in this shape. Unit perish hakasav af meshichazu kimin chaf yevanis. And here Rashi does not use the expression that he says before, the second time the Meshicha is brought, that also this Meshicha is like a chaf yevanis, b'daimit to Meshichas Aaron shalifneze. Similar to when he speaks about the second time when Aaron is anointed. Why there does Rashi only address this Meshicha of Aaron? And then here the third time Rashi says, V'chol ha-meshichas. Now, seemingly, we could explain this difference as follows. Meshichas harikikin und Meshichas Aaron sind zwei besondere inyanim Meshicha legamri. The fact that the matzahs are smeared with oil, and then the fact that Aaron is anointed with this oil, are two completely different kinds of anointings. The Meshicha from the Rekike Matzahs is B'Shem Zayis. Number one, the oil that's actually used for the matzahs is not this special oil that they prepared, as it describes in this week's Parsha, but it's just simple olive oil. Und es aprat von der Asiyas carbon. It's a detail of how the carbon is prepared, like many details that there are in all karbanis. Masha'enke Meshichas Aaron, but when Aaron is anointed, is B'Shem HaMishcha, it's with this unique anointing oil. Und is eine von den Peules zu öftan dem Vikidashto lekain. And it's one of the activities done in order to sanctify Aaron to become elevated to the level of a Kayin. It's a different concept, to anoint him. Nachmer, furthermore, the etzem muvam from Meshicha. The very meaning of the word Meshicha is by Meshichas Mishkan Kayanim Malachim, in the case of when the Mishkan or the Kayanim or kings are anointed, Andesh vi by Meshichas Rikikin. Has a different meaning than the term Meshicha that's used regarding the matzahs. Rashi is mefarish b'parsha seinu, as Rashi says this in our parsha, as by Meshichas Mishkan v'kayanim u'malachim, when the Mishkan or the Kayanim or kings are anointed, is Meshicha metorgim lashon ribui gedula. So you look into the Targum, he uses the term Rabbi, which means that you're being elevated to a higher status, greatness. That's the term of Meshicha here, the anointing. But by the matzahs that are smeared with the oil, anointed, smeared with the oil, is Lashon Aramis ben Kaloshan Ivris. There, the Targum uses a similar term of Meshicha, like in Lashon Kodesh, because over there it doesn't mean greatness. It's not the same concept of anointing of greatness like it is with the Mizbeach or the Kalim, the Mishkan, Kainim, and the Malachim. So it's two completely different kinds of anointings. That the third time the Pasuk speaks about anointing, regarding anointing the Mizbeach, is nicht an anderes Sug Meshicha wie Meshichas Aaron Shalufneza. This is not another category of a Meshicha of what it said just before regarding anointing Aaron. Oich di Meshicha is Virashi is Maktim. This anointing is, as Rashi himself says, B'Shemen HaMishcha, it's with the same special oil, and she is Kedei Lekatshei. And it's also similar to, in the case of Aaron, in order to sanctify the Mizbeach. On the Riber, so based on this we can understand, Bavar and Rashi Dafke by Meshichas Aaron, Af Meshichas Uchol, that it's only by the anointing of Aaron where Rashi has to add and say that this Meshicha as well has something similar as the Meshicha that we spoke about before. The Adgoshe in Imribui Af, the emphasis here to add and say this too is beikir is primarily because nidval do retzach wegen Mashiach sein an ander Metzias Aaron und nitre kikin. It's not just simply because we're talking about an anointing of something else, Aaron, and not the Meshicha of Matzis. Nor, but this is an ander sug Meshicha, legedula, because this is a complete different type of anointing. It's for greatness. As nit cooking to give them. So, true, the fact that it was completely a different kind of Meshicha, but nevertheless, was he's an ander sug Meshicha, is af Meshicha zu kemin chi. Nevertheless, the shape of the Meshicha is in the shape of the key, which is a Chaf Yavanis. That's why Rashi has to emphasize this point here. However, when it comes to the anointing of the Mizbeach, B'Shemen HaMishcha, with this special anointing oil, it's the same as the Meshicha that was mentioned before when Aaron is anointed. Here, Rashi does not have to add and clarify Af Meshicha that this Meshicha is similar to before, because it's obvious that it's in the same category, the same type of Meshicha. This is what it would come out, seemingly. Now, according to what the Rebbe is saying here, it would seem that the conclusion here is that the Meshicha of the Rekikin, of the Matzis, stand out and they're completely different. They're not connected at all to the other Meshichas that the Torah speaks about regarding Kayanim, the Mishkan, the Kalim, and so on. However, as we'll see in the continuation of the Sikha, the Rebbe will explain the fact that the Meshicha of the Rekikin and the Meshicha of the Kainim have the same shape, and Rashi here says, Af Meshicha Zu, is because there is a similarity in what all these Meshichas are coming to accomplish. Even if the very Meshicha itself is not of the same nature, but nevertheless there is a connection between them. Well, before the Rebbe explains this, the Rebbe comes to explain the Meshicha of the Matzis, which is the first Meshicha that's mentioned in the Torah in last week's Parsha, in Parshas Tetzaveh. And let's see what Rashi says in a different place, also about Meshicha, about smearing oil on Matzis. The question, however, here is, L'chayre is Pirish Rashi b'negei Meshichas Rikike Matzis b'Parshas Tetzaveh in stire zu Pirish Rashi in Parshas Vayikra. It would seem that what Rashi says regarding the smearing of the oil on the matzahs in Tetzaveh is in contradiction to what he says later in Parshas Vayikra. In Parshas Tetzaveh, Dr. Rashi bepashtus as meshichas rekike matzahs. So here Rashi just simply says that when it comes to anointing these matzahs, chach, this is an andere sug meshicha, although as explained it's a different category of a meshicha, is this over in them selben oifen with the meshichas b'shemen hamishcha. But nevertheless, the shape and how it was done is the same as the shemen hamishcha, the special oil that was used to anoint the kohanim and the Beis Hamikdash or the Mishkan. Biz as oichem oifen from meshichas Aaron is Rashi medame to meshichas Arikikin, and he says af meshichazu. Rashi compares and says that when Aaron is anointed, it's similar to the way the matzahs were anointed. Well, Derech says that the noch seisim, and then similar, Rashi afterwards says, just very simply, Kol ha-meshichas kimin chaf yavanis. That all anointings, that's the original Rashi that we quoted in our parsha, so Rashi says all meshichas have the same shape. Was v'stimis lashon Rashi is mashma, as mit kol ha-meshichas meinte kepshute, when Rashi uses this expression of kol, he means simply ale meshichas, all. Al klapanim wegen welchem hat gelernt bis da, or at least it's including the anointings that are mentioned in the Torah until this point. Kailol Meshichas Rikike Matzis, including the matzis that were anointed. So here Rashi is clearly saying that the matzahs were anointed or smeared in the shape of this chaf yivanis, like a nun. Aber in Parshas Vayikra, what does Rashi say in Vayikra? By Rikike matzahs meshuchim b'shemen, from carbon mincha. When Rashi speaks about the carbon mincha, which is a flour offering that is also could be fried in a pan, and you make matzahs with it. And there Rashi says that it was anointed with this oil. Bringt Rashi zwei days in Neufan HaMashiach. Here Rashi brings two opinions how this Mashiach was done. Yesh Eimrin, there are those that say Moishchan v'chayzero Moishchan ad sheyichle kol hashemesh belog, that you have the oil that was brought for the carbon mincha, and you take that oil and you keep on smearing the matzah until you finish all the oil that you have. So then there's no shape of any chaf yivanis. Another opinion is Moishchan Kemin Chaf Yivanis, that it has to be smeared in the shape of this Chaf Yivanis. So here we see, as let ein day Harishainem Pirish Rashi, in one opinion, the one that Rashi quotes first, is Oifen Meshicha Sarekikin, Zayndik, and Ande Sug Meshicha, when it comes to smearing the matzahs. It's a different kind of Meshicha smearing, anointing. Takenit Vidi Andere Meshichas Shebeshemen HaMishcha. It's not similar in the way it was done to the anointing used by the special Shemen HaMishcha when it was done for Kainim or the Mizbeach or the Mishkan. Nitvi in Parshas Tetzaveh. So this is not like what Rashi says in Parshas Tetzaveh, but Rashi is Soisim, V'yein Day, where there Rashi just simply says like one opinion that it was done similar, in the similar shape of the Chav Yivanis like the other anointings. So this is seemingly a contradiction here in Rashi. So to explain this, let's first go back to a question that's based on the question that we asked before. Regarding all these places where Rashi talks about exactly the shape of this anointing. Pirish Rashi al Torah is the Chnitkin Sefer Halachas. As mentioned before, Rashi does not write any details that are just halacha, only for the pshat and the pasuk. Is nit glatik, so here it's not understood. What relevance is there in the understanding of the pasuk to know how the Mashiach was done, in what shape, that it was like a chaf yivanis? And even if we would find a reason, Favos, Rashi, why Rashi finds it necessary to explain for even a child that's coming to learn Chumash how exactly this Mashiach was done. Is klal nit move on, it's completely not understood. Favos Rashi darf meirich sein und schreiben, as das is kemin chaf yivanis. Why Rashi has to quote it the way the Gemara says it, that this is a Mashiach made in the shape of a Greek chaf. Shehi asuya kenun shalanu. And that is like the nun of the Aleph base. Und sagt nicht bekitzer. Why doesn't he just say simply in short, as the Mashiach is, as avi anun shalanu, that the Mashiach is done like the nun? Nachmer. Furthermore, when we look at what Rashi says, the few times that it repeats about the shape of this Mashiach, in the Vayt, the Gepirushim, later on when Rashi continues and explains this again, B'shas Rashi chazati b'dem tzir HaMashiach. When Rashi repeats again the shape of this Mashiach, nutzter alamol dam loshen kimin chaf yivanis. The expression Rashi always chooses is to describe it as the chaf yivanis. Nit der manendik as das is kanun shalanu. Not mentioning like he does the first time that it's like a nun. It's tamua. This is very hard to understand. Naniach as Rashi daf mediyah zayin as das is kamin chaf yivanis. Even if we would accept, for whatever reason, Rashi the first time wants to mention that the shape of this Mashiach is like the Greek chaf. Aber nachdem wir schon das einmal gelassen wissen, but after he let us know this point once the first time, is doch massen mistaber as beim weitendige Mitzayah sein Oifen HaMashiach soll nutzen die Maskane wie die Zuris nun. But in the following times, the Urian is going to mention what the shape of this Mashiach is, what would be the most appropriate description for one that's learning, the child that's learning this is, to describe it as a nun. That's the most simplest description. Ubefrat as dafke zi is verstandig und klar beim Chamish Mikra. It's this description of the nun which is understood and is clear to a child learning this. Ulepayol is Rashi meisev blois dem ersten mal as es kanun shalanu. Only the first time Rashi brings the chaf yivanis, he adds to tell us what that is, that it's like the shape of a nun. Und danach, b'chol pam, sagt der nar kimin chaf yivanis. And then every time Rashi talks about the Mashiach, he always just says the fact that it's like the chaf yivanis. Why is that? So, verstandig. So to explain this, first let's clarify. La'achrei habiur v'habirur in dem Girsa anachayne von die Wörter benegeya chaf Yavonis bepirish Rashi. Let's first make sure we have clear exactly what is the right version in the Rashi when he quotes the shape of this Meshicha chaf Yavonis. As we'll see, there are various versions how this is quoted both in Gemara and in Rashi. So let's be clear exactly what it is that Rashi actually says, and then we can understand what Rashi means to emphasize with this. So first in Gemara, how does this shape? How is it quoted in the Gemara? In Masechta Krisis legabe Meshichas Kainim is the Lashon Gemara. So in one place in Gemara, in Krisis, there the Gemara says Kimin Ki, and then the Gemara explains what's Ki, Kimin Ki Yavani, like a Ki Yavani. So which means that there's actually a letter in the Greek alphabet which is called a Ki, and that's the Greek Ki. In Masechta Hayrius, and another place, in Hayrius the Gemara says is the Girsa in the Gemara Shabi Yadenu Kanal Sif Aleph. There it says Kimin Chaf Yavani. It doesn't say ki, it says a chaf Yavani. In Ksavyat from Masechta Hayrius, however, there is Masechta Hayrius, as it is in the Ksavyat, handwritten Gemara before print, is the Gerse ki Yavani, via Masechta Krisis. There it says ki Yavani, like what's quoted in Krisis. On in Masechta Menachos, in a third place in Gemara, Legabe Meshichas Harikikim, where it talks about the matzahs that were smeared, in the Mishnah state, Kimin ki. The Mishnah says that it's ki. On the Gemara is the Ruf Mefarish Kimin Ki Yavani, like the Greek letter that's called Ki. That's the way it's quoted in Gemara. So as you see, in most places in Gemara, it actually says Ki Yavani, that this is a Greek letter with the name Ki. In one place it says Chaf Yavani. In Pirish Rashi ala Teire gefint men kama v'kama nuschais. In Rashi on the Teire, so there's a few different versions of the Rashi. In the Pirush Rashi from the gedruckte Chumashim, when you look into the Rashi that we have in the printed Chumashim, is beim ersten und dritten Pirush Anal she beparshas Tetzaveh, und euch beparshas Seinu, und in Parshas Vayikra, meaning in most places where Rashi says this, steht Kimin Chaf Yavanis. It says that the shape was a Chaf Yavanis. Und beim zweiten Pirush, by Meshichas Arain, is the Lashon Kimin Ki. But by the second time in Parshas Tetzaveh, where it speaks about Aaron being anointed, there Rashi, the version in the Chumashim is that it's like a key. Aber in the Kisveyat from Pirish Rashi, but if you look in the handwritten Rashis that there are before print, Al Derech Zeh and the Fus Rishon V'Sheni, in the very first and second print of Rashi, Zenefaran Kama V'Kama Shinuyim. There are differences in this. Uberubam Sharaisi, the Rebbe says in most places that I've seen, is the Gerse in unser Parsha. So the Gerse in our Parsha, und in the letzte zwei Pirushim Manal Shel Beparshas Tetzaveh, und in Parshas Vayikra, and in the last two times in Tetzaveh, and also in Vayikra. So in other words, in most places, the Gerse of the Rashi is Kimin Ki, that it's like Ki. And in the Mershten Pirush Anal Shel Beparshas Tetzaveh, the very first time when Rashi mentions this shape in Tetzaveh, there it says Kimin Ki Yavonis, like the Ki Yavonis, which seemingly, according to the Kisveyad, Rashi is saying that there's a letter in the alphabet of the Greek alphabet which is Ki, and that's the Ki Yavonis. Aber in Kame Kisveyad wird noch abgeteilt Pirish Kimin Chaf Yavonis. In the first time Rashi is quoting this, some Kisveyad, some handwritings of Rashi have this with the addition of Chaf Yavonis, that it is a Chaf, not the letter Ki in the Greek alphabet, but a Chaf Yavonis. Now, v'milan b'pashtos. So, learning simply this version that it's Ki is the Kavanah in Pirish Rashi, Kimin Ki, punkt vi in Gemara. It's like the version that we have in most places in Gemara, as this meint, the Gemara gufe teichtas the nachab, Kimin Ki Yavani, vi the ois Ki in Lashon Yavan. Ki Yavani means that there's a letter in the Greek alphabet which is Ki. But if that's what it means also in Rashi, looking at the versions of the Rashi and the handwritten Rashis and in the first and second print of Rashi, is Tzarachi and Gadol. This is very difficult to accept. This is what Rashi says, Kimin Ki. How could Rashi just simply say Kimin Ki without giving any additional explanation? If in the Gemara itself, it's not just satisfied with this term of like a key. What es meint Kimin Ki, and the Gemara always explains what ki means, and it adds to say that it's a ki Yavani. that it's this letter in the Greek alphabet that's a key. Is the halachas kama v'kama? Most definitely, as Rashi v'pirushi ala Torah. Rashi, when he writes his explanation in Chumash, was his fara ben Chumash l'mikra. It's just for a child beginning to learn that it's seisem zayin zagin below is kimin ki. Rashi wouldn't simply say kimin ki. How's a child supposed to understand what kimin ki means? Now, v'doichik loymar, it's very difficult to say as Rashi falostich. In the Alle Erte, where sagt kimin ki, that in all places where Rashi just simply says kimin ki, what is he relying on? I've done given them the fact that he said the first time as das main kimin ki ivanis ha'asuya kinun shalano. Are you ready to explain the first time that ki is a Greek letter in the Greek alphabet and it's the shape of a nun, v'chayetze b'zeh, or similar. Nor Rashi is not always relying on that first time that he says this, and then the rest of the times just writes kimin ki, which is not understood at all. Rashi would have added in all of these places just one word, Yuvanis, ki Yuvanis. Zu klar machen, as das is an ois, beloshen Yuvani, that the word ki is a letter in the Greek alphabet. So even though it would seem that in the handwritten Rashis and in the first and second print of Rashi, Rashi is simply saying ki, a Greek letter in the Hebrew alphabet, but it's very difficult to accept this. Rashi wouldn't just simply write kimin ki. So therefore, the Rebbe says, therefore it seems to say that the Pshat in Rashi is as follows. As in the Erte, kimin ki, in those places where we find the version in Rashi that it says kimin ki, is the word ki, the word ki quoted in Rashi, nit ken hetek von Lashon Gemara. He's not quoting from the Gemara that it's a Greek letter in the Greek alphabet ki, und das meint an ois b'shem ki, nor das is a Rosh Tevis. Rather, in Rashi, the word ki is kaf yud, which is a Rosh Tevis. It makes up two words. One is dav shtein ki betfusim shalanu, and it has to be like we have it in our print, kimin ki mitasimin gershayim lo Rosh Tevis, with the apostrophe, meaning that it makes up two words. Dahainu, what are the two words? Chaf Yavanis. Rashi means the Chaf Yavanis. As we have it in our Chumashim, is mefarish in the Mershton Pirish b'Parshas Tetzaveh, and as it's clearly in the Rashi in the first time of Parshas Tetzaveh, even in the handwritten Rashis. So the point that Rebbe is saying is that not only in the Chumashim do you have the Chaf Yavanis, but also even in the handwritten Rashis and the first and second print of Rashi, when it says just simply kimin ki, it means kimin ki with an apostrophe, which is Chaf Yavanis. Now, the Rebbe clarifies, the Pashtus net menon, as the Geshayim with the word ki, when there is that apostrophe in the word of ki, is to mitzayin zayin, as das is anamen von anais. That you shouldn't just think, the reason that the printer, it was added in, or even in the handwritten, it was added in with an apostrophe, to clarify that you shouldn't think that it's a word, ki. Rather, it's to say that this is a letter. It's a letter from the Greek alphabet. That's how you could explain if there's an apostrophe there. But based on what we explained before, and then another point to think about, as Rashi list whenever Rashi writes anything in his Pirish, he's not writing things in a way that it should be ambiguous. He's writing clearly what he wants to say. Is niraloymar as the geshayim and bepashtos as simin shel Rosh Tevis kanal. The apostrophe in the word ki means, as it usually means, which is to make up two words, chaf yavanis. According to this, we gain another point over here. As medaf mit marbezain in the shinuye nuschais utuusei matikim cholo. That we don't have to say that there are so many different versions, whether it's chaf yavanis, whether it's ki, and then there's mistakes of how this was quoted in the print from the handwritten Rashi. As sie haben verfällt oder zugestellt im Wort Yavani, whether they missed the word Yavani or the word Yavani was added, oder as anstatt a Fei-Seifis, a lange-Fei, gestellt a Yud, but instead of it being Chaf, it turned into a Ki. Instead of having the long Fei in the end, it became a Yud, Ki, b'makim Chaf. How did such a mistake happen? How could there be all these different versions in Rashi? Elamai, the explanation here is, Ki in the Rashi is with an apostrophe, which means Chaf Yavanis. That is what Rashi is saying. Okay, so this is the point that the Rebbe is looking to clarify here, that Rashi is specifically saying that the shape of the anointing is kimin chaf yavanis, like the Greek chaf. So now, pizeh, based on this, as Rashi is zok b'chol pam chaf yavanis. The Rashi is always using this term, that the anointing is with the chaf yavanis. Yeshleima, we can say, as the kavan von Rashi mitten ki chaf yavanis is nit zu mitai sein dem Ziereis. Rashi is not simply coming to describe the shape of this letter. Most people have no idea. When they're learning Chumash, they don't know Greek. And Rashi here is not coming to teach you and tell you what that shape is. If he would, then he would always say nun, and that's it. Nor as der Tzir v'oifen ha-meshicha hat ha-shayches mit ois chaf shalonu. Rather, Rashi keeps on saying chaf Yevonis, because he wants you to understand that the shape of the Meshicha is with the letter chaf, because there's a connection to the letter of chaf. What's the explanation for this? The Abarbanel is Mavayir, the Tam, was the Meshicha von Aaron is Kimin Chaf Yevonis. The Abarbanel explains why it was in this shape of the Greek chaf. As das says Meramis, it's here, it's hinting, Shehu Asher Bochar Hashem L'Kayin, that he's being anointed because Hashem chooses him to be the Kayin. Ki Achaf Hirishayna La'isi Kayin. The Chaf is the first letter for the name Kayin, the title of the person that's being anointed here, the Kayin. That's the Chaf, that the Chaf Yevonis, the shape of the anointing, that's what it hints to. So V'yeshleiman, based on this we can say, Oich Rashi Nemton, Rashi also accepts this. Vadera befrier bizman. On the contrary, Rashi actually is before the Abarbanel. This is what Rashi is saying. As the Tam was Mashiach is Kemin Chaf Yevonis. Why is the anointing in this shape of the Chaf Yevonis? Is weil Chaf is the erste Eis from Wort Kayin. Chaf is a Rosh Tevis. It's the first letter of the word Kayin. Now, es ist nit kein Kashe, wie is Shaykh zu sagen, im Pshutische Mikra, you may wonder on this pshat, how can we say, in the simple understanding of a pasuk, that this is what it means, that the Chaf Yevonis is coming to hint to the first letter of the name Kayin. And Aleph, you may wonder, number one, as Rashi is almein and aniyim from Rosh Tevis, Rashi, which explains simple pshat, Rashi says something which is a Rosh Tevis, Beis, und nach Beifen, als der Rosh Tevis, der erste Eis von Lashon Kodesh Wort, kommt gar betzuras Eis in Lashon Yevonis. Here we're talking about a Rosh Tevis of the Hebrew letter Chaf, and we're saying that the shape of the Mashiach was actually in a Greek letter of a Chaf. So it's a very strange way of saying that this is a Rosh Tevis for a Lashon Kodesh letter. Gimel, a third point that's difficult to accept, seemingly, und dem ganzen Ihnen sagt Rashi nicht befehrisch. And Rashi is not even spelling this all out clearly. He relies that you'll understand this on your own. Even the child learning this, by learning. How could that be? So how could we say that this is why Rashi keeps on mentioning again the Chaf Yevonis, because it's the letter Chaf that's significant as the first letter, the Rosh Tevis of the Kayin. So this is not a question. Weil Rashi hat schon früher in sein Pirish beParshas Bereishis gelost wissen, als euch bepschutischer Mikra benutzt sich die Teure mit Rosh Tevis. Rashi already notified us once that in the simple pshat of the pasuk, the Torah uses things that are words that are Rosh Tevis. Rashi teitcht dort dem Wort Shamayim. Rashi in Parshas Bereishis explains the word Shamayim, heaven. What does Shamayim mean? Mit kama fashidene Rosh Tevis. Not just one Rosh Tevis, a few different meanings how it's a Rosh Tevis. It includes words in it. Either it means Samayim, it carries water, Shamayim, there's water there, or it's Eish Umayim, it's fire and water. Und is das Mefarish im Pshutische Mikra. And Rashi is explaining that this is the simple pshat of the pasuk. Nit bagdamas does an Midrashi Agada. Rashi doesn't give any introduction that this is a Medrash. So Veis Meshayin, as an Ois can mean an Rosh Tevis. So it's already clear that a letter is not just a letter, but it's a beginning of a word. When Rashi again says that there's something that's connected to a letter, versteht man, as das kann sein, as das ist verbunden mit Rosh Tevis, so it's understood that it's not just a letter, but every letter could also be a beginning of a word. And here it's very easy to see how the Chaf, when you come to anoint the Kayin, is the first letter of the word Kayin. It's also not at all difficult to accept, as Torah soll sich beziehen zu an Eis, was ist nicht von Lashon HaKodesh. That the Torah should be speaking about something, and it's relating to a letter that's not in the Lashon Kodesh Aleph base. Because this already Rashi also taught us. Then Vart Ule Teitofis. The word Ule Teitofis regarding Tefillin is Rashi Mefarish. What does this word Ule Teitofis mean? Tait or Tat, Bekatvi. In the Katvi language is Shtayim, is two. And then feist, the second part of the word, is ba'afriki, the language in Africa is shtayim, another two. And this is the source for the four compartments, the four bottom of the tefillin. The says as Torah ruft on tefillin mit anomen vart. The Torah refers to the tefillin with a name, with a word, velach ist zuneut gestellt von Werte von zwei andere Lashonos, which is a combination of actually parts of words of two different languages. So not only does the Torah use other languages, it combines different languages in one word, and this is the name of none other than the tefillin. So it's not a wonder that here the chaf of the kohen that was anointed is with the chaf Yavanis, with the shape of a Greek letter of chaf. This is the pshat of why Rashi keeps on saying chaf Yavanis. Now, aber l'chayre is there being nittais gehalten, but it would seem that this explanation does not fit with Rashi. Warum Rashi sagt doch dem Pirish as Meshichas kemen chaf Yavanis nit no by Meshichas Arin Kayin. Rashi says that the shape of the Meshicha is like the chaf Yavanis, not only regarding Arin, the Kayin that was anointed, nor ech by Meshichas Mishkan v'chela, but also by the Mishkan and the Kayin that are anointed. Und noch mehr, furthermore, dem ersten Mal, where Rashi sagt this, is God by Meshichas Rikikin canal. The first time is by the matzahs that were smeared with this with oil, not this oil, but with oil. Und bei Meshichas Aaron, sagt Rashi dem Lashon Kanal, af Meshichas Ukiminki. And as quoted before, Rashi says that the Meshicha of Aaron is similar to the Meshicha of the matzahs, same shape of Chaf Yavanis. Is he can learn in Pirish Rashi? So then how can we explain regarding Rashi, what Rashi says, as mitten sagen, as the Meshicha is Kimin Chaf Yavanis, is Kavanase als Reish Tevas Kayin. That the word Chaf Yavanis, that the letter Chaf Yavanis is the first letter of the word Kayin. Vibalt as b'mekayim yisrael, that's nit wegen Kayin. The other times that the shape was also used in the anointing, it's not regarding a Kayin. So v'yeshleimar, the answer to this is, no, this is the correct pshat in Rashi. As the mit, was Rashi sagt, but the alle Meshichas, as is an event, kemin chaf Yavanis, if all of the anointings were in this shape of the chaf Yavanis, wie is noch madgish b'pirusha b'parshas tetzaveh, and azoich b'parshasenu, kol ha-Meshichas kemin chaf Yavanis. Rashi emphasizes twice that all anointings are with this shape of the chaf Yavanis. Is kavanasai lahashmienu. Rashi's intention is to let us know as the geder ha-Meshicha and the alle fallen is verbunden mit inyan ha-kohuna. In all cases, the Meshicha is connected with the concept of the kohen, the kohuna, the serving of the kohen. Nit mit a kohen, not necessarily with the person, the kohen, not the kohen as a title for the person, but with the inyan of the kohen, of the kohuna in the broader sense. All of these Meshichas, including the Meshicha of the matzah and the Meshicha of the mishkan, the kelim, it's all connected to kohuna. That's why they were all the same shape of the chaf Yavanis, the chaf making up kohuna. What's the explanation for this? The beer and them. So the explanation is as follows. So beginning with the first Meshicha by the matzahs. The Rikike matzahs should be parshas tetzaveh. Zene from karbonis hamiloyim. So the matzahs there are part of the karbonis that were brought in the miloyim when the kohanim were inaugurated and installed to be serving in the Beis Hamikdash. Was in Yanim is wie the pasuk sagt dort. What are these karbonis? So the pasuk there says, "V'zeh adova shetasa lehem lekadesh eisam lekayinli." These are the karbonis that are brought to sanctify them, that they should come and serve for me. Lekach goymer, v'lechem goymer, or kike matzahs meshucham b'shemen, the bread, and then the matzahs that are smeared with this oil. As durach the karbonis hamiloyim is niskadesh yedeim from Aaron Obanav and niskat shilukona, or nismala yedeim, they are installed to serve and they become sanctified for kohona, to serve. Und the far is Rashi madgish, as the mishichas are kikin is given kimin chaf Yavanis. So therefore Rashi emphasizes that since the point of the matzahs, which is part of the karbanis that are brought in order to sanctify the kainim to serve, it's also shaped in the size of this chaf Yavanis. Now the gather from the Meshicha is, how do we define this Meshicha? It's not simply a detail of how a carbon is done. Als an inyan shel miluim was tutoif lekadesh eisam lekayinli. This is part of the process to install the kainim to be sanctified, to come and serve for the kohuna in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan. So that's why it's the chaf Yavanis. The says what this means is the Meshichas are kikin da miluim. When these matzahs of these karbanis of miluim were done and it was smeared, is nit blois eine von die asiyas was great zu the kike matzahs zu werden royal carbon kanal sif base. It's not simply part of the process to prepare the carbon that it should be fit to be brought as a carbon. Now the Meshicha gufa is a chelek von inyan miluim. The very anointing itself is part of the process of installing the kainim. Was piled them lekadesh eisam lekayinli, that affects the result of the kainim being sanctified to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. The bit is verantwortet. With this, we answer bepashtus very simply the contradiction we brought before in Rashi. Was Rashi bepashtus tetzave is seisim kadeya as the rikike matzas of Mashiach gewen kemechof Yavanis. Why here in Pashtus tetzave Rashi simply says that the matzas were smeared in the shape of the chof Yavanis. Mashenken in Pashtus Vayikra bringt it 2 days, but in Vayikra Rashi brings 2 opinions. Weil al pipshutish al mikra zen das 2 besondere inyanim. In the simple understanding of the pasuk, it's 2 completely different points. In Parashas Tetzaveh, wo es redt sich wegen the miluim, because we're speaking about these unique karbanis for the kayanim, is oich the mishichas harakikin a tail from the minyan miluim. The smearing of the oil is part of the process of installing the kayanim. Was totoiv the kedushas kohonas Aaron kanal, which accomplishes and brings the holiness and the sanctity of the kohona of Aaron. Obemele is the Mashiach Kimel Chaf Yavanis. So here Rashi simply says that the Mashiach is done in this shape of the Chaf Yavanis. Mashenk in the Parshas Vayikra, wo es redt sich wegen a carbon mincha mafretanor, where it speaks about a carbon mincha which is baked, hat es kein shayches ne zu inyan kohona. So this is not at all connected to kohona. No stam a prat in Maisa carbon. It's a detail of how the carbon mincha was prepared. The Rebbe is in Pshutish Mikra Da, and the sin is looking for beide days. Here, in the simple pshat of the pasuk, there are 2 opinions how the smearing of the oil was done. Onach meshkulein, both opinions are equal. It may have been in the shape of this chaf Yavanis, or may have not been. It was just smeared and smeared again until they used up all the oil, but not in this shape at all. So it's only by the kohone, because of the letter chaf, which is the beginning of the word kohone, that Rashi says only this pshat that it was done in this shape. Moving on to the second Mashiach, or actually the third Mashiach, Mashiach of the Kainim, that we understand, the Chaf is the Kakayim, but then when it speaks about the Mashiach the 3rd time, for the Mishkan and the Kalim. As Bleibla bened glatek, benegay, Mashiachas, Mishkan v'Kalim, but it's not smoothly understood regarding the anointing of the Mishkan itself and its vessels. Was war Shayches miyachedes haben die Mashiachis durch Rashatevis, Chaf Yavanis Kanal zu Kain. What connection is there with these anointings to anoint and to sanctify the vessels and the actual structure of the Mishkan itself? What connection is there to the Kain himself? So we can explain this. Loit Rashi, according to Rashi, as already indicated before, is the Chaf Yavanis, the Reisha Teva, nit dafke from word Kain. The Chaf is not the beginning of the word Kain, which is a title of a person. Als Shem HaToyer was bezieht sich bloß zu Aaron Abanav. It's a title for Aaron and his children. This is mashma from Pashtus Lashon Har Barbanel. That's what it seems that Barbanel is saying. Not rather kanal, as explained before, from Klolus the Gemvart Kohuna. It's the letter Chaf is the first letter of the general word Kohuna. The shadis from Kohuna, the serving of the Kainim. What this means is, as Oich Meshichas Aaron Abanav, when we're speaking here about Aaron and his children that were anointed, is in Yana Nitnar Azei Veren the Mit Kainim. The point is not about them as people being elevated to a higher status, that they now become Kainim, nor Balashon HaPasik, Vikidashta Oisam Lechahin Li, that they now are brought into this Aveda of serving, that they now are serving in the Beis HaMikdash. As the Mishicha Tutoiv the Kedusha Velchebrengtze Arayin in their Serara, it brings them into this level to be ministers, or to this position, V'shedis and serving, V'aveda and work, Fun Kohona, but not just as a title of the people that they now have this name Akayin. So if he says, move on, the Shaychus from Meshichas, Mishkan v'Keila to Chaf Yavanis, Rosh Tevis Kayin Kohona. So then we can understand the connection of the anointing with this Chaf Yavanis, which is the letter beginning of the word Kohona. Kishayin v'Meshichas Aaron Abanav is in the Kaddish Everen Roy L'Sheiris V'Aveda. Just like sanctifying Aaron and his children, it's for the service, to serve and to work in the Beis HaMikdash. Azay Eich benegay to Mishkan v'Keila, the same is also regarding the Mishkan and its vessels. The Mishicha from Mishkan v'Keila what Eich getan, by anointing the Mishkan and its vessels, what it accomplished is, in within these Kelim, a Kedusha, velchamacht zei roi, as mezol in und mit zei ton, the Aveda v'Shiris. The point of the Mashiach is that now these Kelim become fit to be used, and with them will be done this service and this work in the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan. So therefore the anointing here is also, the anointing of the Mishkan and the Kelim is the anointing of Kohuna, of the elevating it to Kedusha, that it could be used for the serving in the Beis HaMikdash. So all of these anointings, from the matzes to the kainim and to the mishkan and kalim, all in the shape of chaf yevanis, and Rashi is emphasizing kol, they're all in the same shape, in order to make the point that it's all one nekuda. The meshichas is similar by all of them, the kohuna, b'sheiras, to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so now we can come back now, based on all of this, to explain what Rashi says in our parsha. We could now explain what Rashi says in our parsha, that kol ha-meshichas kimin chaf yevanis, all anointings are like the chaf yevanis, chutz mishal melachim shen kimin nezer. Besides by the kings, that it was in the shape of a crown. So the question was, why is Rashi mentioning the kings here? Why is Rashi saying this rule that it was all in the shape of the chaf yevanis? Although Rashi al is not a sefer of halachas, which was the question that Rabbi began with here in the beginning of Siv Daled. Why is Rashi bringing b'chal this concept, the shape? So based on what we explained before, it's understood. Is mudgish umuvam, because with this, what's emphasized and understood here is via zoy the shemen mishcha is shemen mishchas kodesh. The Torah gives a name for this oil, that this anointing oil is called holy oil. What does that mean? As the mishicha tutayv the minyan kedusha. So what that means is it has this name of holy oil. Not that the oil itself is holy, but that the oil accomplishes and brings kedusha for what it's anointing. Who's that man? As this is the Gedder from Shemen HaMishcha. Where do we see this expressed? That this is what defines this anointing oil. So Rashi, it's for this reason Rashi comes and describes the shape of the anointing, that Kol HaMeshichis from Shemen HaMishcha is Kemin Chaf Yevanis, that it was always in the shape of the Chaf Yevanis. Was weist Kanal as das tut oiv the Kedusha zu werden roi l'sheiris kohana. That the point of the shape of the Chaf Yevanis means that it's this anointing that elevates the Kayanim, the Mishkan, the Kalim to the status of now being fit to serve. And that's why it's called Shem Mishchas Kodesh. So Rashi is not just simply saying the shape of what this is, but he's coming to explain in Pshutei Shel Mikra why the oil is called Shem Mishchas Kodesh. So now, this is why Rashi continues and says that by kings it wasn't this way. Because in as a proof for this point, in the as the Oifen HaMeshicha, Kemin Chaf Yevanis, that the way, the shape of how the Meshicha was done is verbunden mit dem Mechuven und Oifte von der Meshicha. It's not just some random shape, but it's actually expressing the point and what this Meshicha accomplishes, which is Kohone, is Rashi Moisef Arayeh. So Rashi adds and says a proof. When there was other anointings done, but it was not for kohone, so then you don't have this shape. And therefore, chutz mishal malachim shen kimin nezer. Besides by kings, where it was like a crown. Meshichas malachim, by anointing kings, was di meshicha, is nit verbunden mit kohone. So this meshicha is not related to kohone, is di meshicha nit kimin chaf yevanis. So over here, it's actually not in the shape of the chaf yevanis. Not an anointing was massen together on malchus. Here, the shape of the Meshicha is fitting to kingdom, kimin nezer, like a crown. So this is the proof that the shape of the Meshicha is related specifically to Kohona. It's not just a random shape, and the Kohona is the Kedusha that you install the Kayin into, and that's why it's called Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. That's the Pshat in Rashi why he adds Chutz Mishal Malachim. Now, based on what we explained there, we can say a slightly different Pshat and in a more simpler way. But Pashtus Yesiya Shleimar, simpler we can say as follows. In the Pirushei Rashi of the Psukim of Parsha Seinu, if you look in the Pirushim of Rashi here in the Psukim of the Parsha, Vert et lechamol demont neisef lal now v'gem meshichas malachim. Besides in this Rashi, there are a few more times where Rashi does mention about the kings that were anointed. Afal pi is in the Psukim, Vert klal nit gered v'gem melech. Even though the Psukim it doesn't mention at all about a king being anointed. The Tama Dover, the reason for this is, the Baltas Do is the Parsha from Asiyas Shemen HaMishcha L'Doirei Seichem. We're talking about preparing this unique oil that's going to be used for all future generations. On L'Doiris hat man doch dem Shemen HaMishcha euch genutzt von Meshichas Malachim. And in future generations, this anointing oil is used also for anointing kings. The Rebbe darf man sagen, so therefore it must be said, as in the Psukim da, werden euch nirmas al kopanim in yanim for Meshichas Malachim. There's a hint also for what this oil will be used for the Doirei Seichem, for future generations, for the kings. Und der Vater mont Rashi da kam pomim wegen Meshichas Malachim. And therefore Rashi does mention a few times about this oil being used for anointing the kings. So therefore, based on this, we can say, Val derech zeh, and then Pirish Rashi. Similar in this Rashi here as well. Shas Rashi sagt, Kol HaMashiach is Kimin Chof Yevonis. When Rashi explains regarding the Kohanim that are anointed, and it's in this shape of the Chof Yevonis, and as explained before, what's this shape of the Chof Yevonis? Kedei Tzvara is bringing as the Oifen Mashiach is Masim zu Pa'ulis HaMashiach, that the shape of how the Mashiach was done is not a random thing, but it actually is according to what the Mashiach is coming to accomplish. It's the Chof for the Kohana, for the Kedusha of the Kohen. So therefore he mentions as well as Oich Mashiachas Malachim is an anoifin Hamasam together Amalchus. That when kings are anointed, it's also with a shape that corresponds and is befitting for the kingdom. And therefore by kings it was different, it was like a crown. Or canal, and as explained before. Therefore, this is also based on the point that was explained there, that the Mashiach, the shape of the Mashiach expresses what the Mashiach came to accomplish. This is the Pshat and the Rashi, the Chof Yevonis. Okay, now here the Rebbe will explain in Yenish Shel Torah what is the significance of Yevonis. Although the Rebbe brought before that it's not a wonder in Pshuta Shemikra why we're using a shape of a Greek letter to hint something regarding the word Kohona and Lashon Kodesh. We find it by Tefillin, Teitafes, but there is a deeper reason why it's hinted Dafka in Yevonis. From the Yenish Shel Torah, the Pirish Rashi, the wine of Torah, the secret of Torah in Rashi, l'chayre is nit klatik. Seemingly, it's still not smoothly understood. Mistaka as oich an ois von Lashon Yevonis can in Torah benutzt werden als Rashi Tevis von Lashon Kodesh dicken Wort, kanal. Yes, it's possible that the Torah is using a Greek letter, a shape of a Greek letter, to hint something that is the beginning of a Lashon Kodesh word. Aber my time of Lashon Yevonis wird genutzt dafke by dem minyan. But why is it that this Lashon Yevonis is used specifically here regarding this subject, regarding anointing, using the oil in the Mishkan to anoint the Mishkan and the Kainim? Is the beer pnimi bezeh? So the deeper explanation for this is as follows. As is Yedua the Pirish pnimi from the Maimah Chazal, it's known the deeper explanation of what it says in the Gemara regarding the story of Chanukah as the Yevonim timu kol hashmanim shebeichel. The Yevonim, so they defiled, they made impure all of the oil in the Heichel. Ashmanim shebeheichel. Why did they go look for the oil in the Heichel? What does that hint to? Zanemeram is of Chachme the Kedusha. The oil, just like oil, rises above all other liquids. So to Chachme the Kedusha, Chachme is holy, is the wisdom which is above everything else, and Chachme the Kedusha, Chachme of holiness. This is what oil hints to. Val Shemen is Bechinas Chachme. Oil is Chachme. And the oil in the Beis HaMikdash is the oil of Kedusha. Und die Yevanim Chachma de lo Mazeh. The Yevanim which represent impure wisdom. They are the opposition of the holy Chachma in the Beis HaMikdash. Sie haben hereingebracht that Tumer, Rachmana litzlan, in dem Shemesh HaBeichel. So they, God save us, brought an impure Chachma into the Shemen of the Heichel in the Beis HaMikdash. That's what the Yevanim did. Und der Bittul from Klippas Yavan, so how do you nullify this impurity of Yavan? Is durch den Pach Shemen, was is Chosum b'Chisamay shel Kohen Gadol. It's with this jug of oil that was sealed with the seal of the Kohen Gadol that they couldn't touch, they couldn't reach. Der Pach Shemen. What does this Pach Shemen represent? Is the Bechine from Shemen Mishchas Kodesh. This is the Shemen of this holy anointing oil. But this is the Dage from Kodesh, was is Hecher von Chachme und von Welt von Seder Shtalshulas. Kodesh means holy, means it's elevated, it's pure, it's removed, it's higher than any level of Chachmeh that there is in the world or on any level in the system, at any level of creation. Und der Rebbe is nit nur, was Klippas Yavan kennet menatzeach sein dem Shemen. Not only can the impurity of Yavan not reach and defeat this level of Kedusha, of this Chachmeh, nor verkehrt, on the contrary. The Shemen Mishchas Kodesh is menatzeach and mevatel Klippas Yavan legamri. This holy anointing oil will be victorious and will totally nullify the impurity of Yavan. So therefore this is also the reason for was the Mashiach. The Shemen HaMishcha is Kemin Chof Yevonis. Why? When they anointed with this anointing oil, it's in the shape of a Chof for Kohone, but what Chof? The Greek Chof. Larames, this is the hint as the Shemen HaMishcha that this anointing oil get the koyach zum mevatel sein Klippas Yavan. This empowers to nullify the impurity of Yavan. Biz, to nullify them to the extent as nit not as Yavan nit menaget zu Kedusha. that not only in Yavan does not oppose holiness, nor verkehrt. On the contrary, Loshin Yavanis Atzma wird genutzt nishapach l'kedusha. The chaf in the shape of the Greek chaf is now being used. It's been transformed into holiness. The chaf Yavanis is Metayer and Keveya, the Oifen HaMashiach. It's the very chaf Yavanis itself, which is a description, and it sets how the Mashiach, the anointing in the Beis HaMikdash or in the Mishkan is done. Hamshachas HaKadosh, now bringing holiness to the Kayanim, to the Mishkan, and to the Kalim. Furthermore, Makdim Refuah HaMashiach L'Makeh Gzeres Malchus Yavan HaRasha. By this anointing, with this oil in the shape of the Greek chaf, this brings first the healing by this anointing before the Gzeira, before the decree that came from Malchus Yavan HaRasha, and therefore they were defeated. And furthermore, what we find that it says in the Gemara regarding writing a Sefer Torah in the Greek language, it's a discussion in Gemara whether you can write the Sefer Torah in any language, and the Gemara brings the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that the only language that a Torah could and could be written in is in Greek, Yavan, and the source is in the pasuk where it says Yafta Lekim LeYefes, that the Eibusha says that the Yefes is beautiful, his language is beautiful, and Yeheba Ole Shem, it should be in the tents of Shem, in the tents of the Yidden that have their Torah. Schreiben, and that is we see that you can write Loshen v'Oisiyas Yavan, the language and even the Greek letters of the Greek alphabet, Velech is Mufchar, which is the choicest and the best of all languages, Davzai B'Sifri Kedusha Yidden, and this should be used for the holy Svarim of Yidden. So this is the idea of not only overcoming and defeating the Loshen Yavanis, but actually transforming and using it in Kedusha itself. That's the significance of the Chaf Yavanis in this case. We could also have now a deeper understanding in the significance of the letter Chaf specifically. Not only as the Rosh Tevis for Kayim, but there's something else that's significant in the letter Chaf. Chaf is Merames of Sfiris HaKeser, Ki Yidua. The Chaf being the Rosh Tevis for the word Keser, so it's a hint to Keser, the higher level of the crown. Keser is above all of the levels of the spheres of the system of creation. Where is the source of this power to refine and even transform the Greek language? It comes from a level which is above any limitation of creation, from the Shem and Mishchas Kodesh, which is higher than any level of Seder Shtalshalos, and that's the Chaf. On der Inyan, wie the Shem and Mishchas Kodesh is mevarer Loshen Yavanis, this idea that the Shem and Mishchas Kodesh refines and elevates the Greek language, this will be completely revealed when Mashiach comes. Only then will we have the ability to refine and elevate the highest levels of Klippe, Keser, Chachma, and Bina of Klippe as well. Was the Shemen HaMishcha is gemacht geworden l'dorei seichem. This is also hinted in the fact that this Shemen HaMishcha is being made for all future generations. Kailol la'asad lavai, including for the future when Mashiach comes. Eilamis, this is the oil that's going to be used forever. On Nachmer and Anayfen as kulei kayam la'asad lavai. It all remains and it's intact, hidden for when Mashiach comes. Because the real depth and the content of what this anointing oil represents, will be accomplished ultimately and fully la'asad lavai in the future when Mashiach comes.